Birds of Prey, issue 6, Chuck Dixon writing with Greg Land on art. This is also wrapping up well, this was a 3-parter rather than a 2-parter, but this is, the monster in the lake, this name I can't pronounce.
I was going to say, can you remember the name after all this time?
Maka Icha Hatto or something, I don't know.
I don't think you're that far off.
I'm not that far off, but it definitely wasn't quite that.
No.
But and we have the Ravens who, because they're going through the time field around this satellite that's crashed in the water, they end up in the past and have to fight their way back to the present day, and which they do briefly, but then by the end of the issue there's a sort of cliffhanger where they're in the... They seem to be in the future, but they seem to be so far that they're in like Commandy times by the looks of it.
I'm not entirely sure when or where they are. I mean, where I assume it's the same, but when. They're either in the future or, I don't know, is this supposed to be like Native American stuff?
It depends. If it's in the future, then it's not. But if it's in the past, yeah.
Yeah. It's because the dialogue, I think they say, we missed the 20th century by a long shot, which implies quite far full. They overshot, right? But I don't know exactly.
But they did arrive in present day in the water because they fight Black Canary and then they go back through the time warp sort of bubble. So they could have went back again, and they're just not aware of that. Before we get to the main plot, though, we actually have to talk about the first few pages, which is the payoff to Who's Been Watching Barbara. And I suppose I shouldn't be surprised, but I do kind of like this, which is it turns out not to be a villain. It's not someone who's stalking her in the traditional sense. It's Batman. It occurs to Batman, the cave, he's like, okay, I've watched enough to know that Babs has got this role of Oracle under control. I can trust her. And it's not, I should rephrase that. It's not it would suspect that he couldn't trust her. It's that he's making sure she can cope, that she's not under too much stress.
That she's holding up under the pressure, because it's a lot of responsibility being Oracle, as opposed to just being Batgirl.
And Alfred kind of points out, isn't this a little iffy? And then Babs comes up on the screen and says, well, you didn't put, at least I should thank you for not putting a camera in the bathroom. You dick.
Yeah, and I actually realized, some sassy Alfred here, because Bruce is like, I need to know that she's stable. And Alfred goes, oh, and you feel like you're a proper judge of that. Yeah,
and even just his hat at the end, because he's so proud of Barbara for one-upping him by revealing she knew he was watching the whole time. Really funny to me. And there's also a payoff to the other subplot that I was enjoying, which, so I think they were tracking Barbara, the military, the guy in the Pentagon who was determined to find this hacker who was getting into files and stuff. I do think that what they were tracking was what Barbara was doing, but Barbara, of course, has got a proxy and is set up someone else. And there's a neat little payoff here where she's at the computer, she's talking to Black Canary, and she's like, what's that noise? And then the next page is the helicopters, and it's the guy's like, yeah, get them. We're going to get this bastard. And then, it's not her, it's some dude, and it turns out to be someone who works for Blockbuster. And Blockbuster comes out and just beats the piss out of them. It just picks up one of their comms and says, I'm going to assume this was a mistake, and I'll look no further into it as long as you back off now. I will leave your bruised but very much alive men in the elevator for you to retrieve them.
Yeah.
And then it cuts back to Babs, and there's just a bird tapping on the window, and that's what the noise she was looking at was. I thought it was cute. I kind of snickered and went, oh, okay, very good.
I think it was a little bit just over dramatic, I think, for me. I think if you'd played it without the extra Babs bit, with the bird, I liked it a little bit more, but it was just a bit on the nose for me. I've not been super into this subplot.
I know.
For the whole time anyway, though.
Yeah. All the underwater stuff is pretty straightforward. Black Canary's fighting. King Cobra's down there because they want the satellite. And Canary's just kind of just sort of staying back for a bit, and she's just watching the Ravens. She's not really sure who she is. Barbara has to look into the logo for a bit before they realise, hey, this is at least Cheshire. They shouldn't really know who the other two are. She's like, oh, but...
She's like, I'm going to assume that she recruited professionals.
Yeah, they're probably dangerous. Maybe not get into it. But she does get into a fight with them and is able to retrieve the satellite. The fun stuff, though, the monster actually comes and hits the Cobra ship and kind of saves the day. King Cobra ejects himself and leaves all his men to get arrested. Would you expect any less? So they literally have their own Loch Ness Monster now, which came through the time warp. And Black Canary's like, hey, you've got time to go put that billboard up. Get the tourists in. Just maybe don't go swimming too much.
Yeah. Just keep an eye out.
Yeah. And then there's the cliffhanger with the thing. There was an interesting page at the end. There was a little prologue. That's what it says. Not epilogue. It says prologue.
Yes, this is presumably for the next story rather than anything to do with this one.
Yeah, it's a character in a hat and a trench coat, classic kind of shady stuff, going to basically a group that try to get people out of prison, like get people they believe are innocent.
Free political prisoners specifically.
Yeah. And this shady character tries to explain that he wants them to get someone out of prison, and the woman tries to explain it's not that simple. It's not, there's ways to go about this, and he's like, "No, trust me, we'll be doing it my way." And
I insist that in this case it does work this way.
Oh, very, very possibly. I'm sure he believes it. But we just get like a glimpse of his eyes and his teeth, and they're very vampire-y. Is this a Copperhead sort of character? I think I'm getting.
It could be. Yeah. I mean,
I'm not sure who it is.
There are obviously vampires in the DC universe. That's true. That's a thing that we've played with.
I feel like Copperhead's the exact sort of tier of villain that might pop up in this Birds of Prey book, though.
It does sound very plausible.
That's kind of the first thing I think of. I mean, the art side of things, talking about this, it's been kind of an interesting discussion with the Greg Land stuff, because Greg Land, of course, became
Greg Land.
Became Greg Land, but this is kind of pre his, Greg Land reputation days. And it's fine, honestly. I mean, it's not all great, it's not all perfect by any means, but there's a lot of fun beats in the art, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's probably one of his weaker issues of the bunch so far. But maybe one of his more consistent issues, if that makes sense. There's no real standout, really strong pages. But there's not as many, glaring weak points either. It's just a very kind of mid-level fine for the most part. I find this one.
Yeah. It's interesting that this did wrap up several subplots as well as the main plot they've been doing for a few issues. So clearly,
it definitely feels like we're moving on to the next thing now.
And I guess originally this would have been the end of a trade, even though trades weren't as consistent for every book back then.
No, but 1 to 6 probably would have been this trade.
Because most of this was not collected in trades originally. Maybe it started out that way, but a lot of the run was missing before the newer stuff. So, which is a shame, and it's part of the reason why it was maybe harder to get a hold of for a while, unless you did want to hunt down single issues. But luckily, Digital came to the rescue, and you can get all the singles now.
Yes, thank you DC Universe Infinite for just having them all here lined up for me.
And obviously not as good, but I mean, Comixology did kind of, like, all of a sudden, all these issues that were hard to get single issues of, now you can just get them on Comixology.
As much as I'm praising DC Universe here, Comixology is the primary reason why digital comics are a thing. All.
I think it's important to point out that if DC Universe and Marvel Unlimited didn't exist, being able to just have the option to buy issues for $1 or $2,
pretty reasonable given the reality of getting them otherwise.
Yes, so I will never complain about that. Fun issue. Not a spectacular issue. I had some fun beats. The time warping stuff, I do think felt a little bit. It obviously explains the monster, but I actually think it felt undercooked for the Raven stuff, where I'm not really sure. I mean, maybe there's going to be something that comes out of it later, where because they've spent time in a different time period, they're going to have some sort of advantage later, so it'll be relevant.
It kind of just feels like just because now.
In the context of this issue on its own, I mean, Black Canary and Oracle never even become aware that there's a time issue, really. They're never aware that they're traveling through different places, or there's no danger. Black Canary doesn't travel anywhere and have to find her way back or anything like that.
No, it's none of that.
It's
pretty straightforward. It's
pretty straightforward, and it's only the Ravens who ever go through it, really. So that's a very interesting tactic. It makes you feel very separate, and almost like you could have just not bothered for the most part.
It makes me wonder, are the Ravens coming back in this book, or does it show up somewhere else to pay off what they're doing? I don't actually know.
That's possible. There could have been some other book set in this time period at the time that maybe they show up in or something. Yeah. It's always possible to consider with comics. So, but not a bad issue by any means. What are you giving it?
No, I'm going to give it a 7. I think it's perfectly good.
Yeah, I agree with a 7. Yeah, perfectly solid and readable. I particularly like the back and this has been true the whole run really, but the back and forth with Babs and Dinah. When Dinah's like typing into her like her waterproof like computer on her arm, and
that's the thing that makes the book work really.
Yeah.
Without that, this would fall apart pretty quickly.